The Great Train Wreck of 1918, Nashville, Tennessee. 2 trains, 1 track, no second chances. It was just after dawn on July 9, 1918, when 2 steam-powered passenger trains barreled toward each other outside Nashville, Tennessee. Neither was supposed to be there. Both were late. And in a moment of deadly miscommunication, they collided head-on in a wooded curve so violent, the crash echoed for miles. The wreckage looked like a battlefield. Cars stacked like matchsticks, bodies flung into the trees. More than 100 lives were lost, most of them African-American laborers, headed to build a future that would never arrive. It became the deadliest train crash in U.S. history. So how did this happen? Dispatchers misread signals. Engineers made fatal assumptions. There was no fail-safe, no second check. And what followed wasn't just grief, it was reform. The crash sparked an overhaul of railway protocols across the country. Train dispatching systems were modernized, signal procedures were rewritten, and suddenly what had been routine became regulated. But here's the chilling part. The same pattern of mistakes, miscommunication, assumption, lack of oversight, would reappear again and again in North American rail history. So if you think this was the worst it got, wait until you hear what came next. Lac-Mégantic rail disaster. The town never saw it coming. And by sunrise, half of it was gone. Just after 1 a.m. on July 6, 2013, the people of Lac-Mégantic, Quebec were asleep. Quiet, peaceful. But hurtling toward them was a 74-car freight train, fully loaded with crude oil, unmanned, out of control, and moments away from turning their lives into a nightmare. The train derailed in the town's heart. Several tankers exploded. Not just fire, a firestorm. Flames swallowed buildings. The blast flattened the downtown core. 47 lives were lost in an instant, and an entire community was shattered. And the cause? A cascade of failures. The handbrakes weren't fully set. The engineer had left the train parked on a grade. The tank cars, DOT 111s, were notorious for rupturing under stress, but no one expected them to become fuel for hell. In the aftermath, grief turned to fury. Canada and the US overhauled their safety standards. Outdated tank cars were phased out. Hazardous material transport laws were rewritten. But the scars on Lac-Mégantic remain, visible, emotional, generational. And here's what keeps people up at night. The system that allowed this to happen? It was standard, until it wasn't. Eschede train disaster. It was Germany's pride, a marvel of modern rail travel, until a single fracture turned it into twisted steel and silence. On June 3, 1998, Intercity Express Train 884 was gliding at 125 miles per hour through the German countryside. Sleek, silent, packed with commuters, but beneath one of the wheels, a metal fatigue crack, tiny and ignored, had begun to grow. Then it snapped. The wheel disintegrated, piercing through the train's floor and embedding into a car. Moments later, the train derailed while crossing a bridge. The bridge collapsed. So did 12 carriages. In just seconds, 101 people were dead. It became the world's deadliest high-speed train disaster. The investigation exposed a brutal truth. The wheel had been redesigned, from forged steel to a cheaper hollow variant. Warnings were missed, inspections rushed, and the result? Catastrophic failure at full speed. Though this happened outside North America, its impact crossed oceans. Countries around the world, including the US and Canada, reevaluated high-speed rail safety, inspection standards, and the materials used on the tracks we trust. And here's the haunting takeaway. Sometimes it's not the crash that terrifies you. It's knowing the warning signs were there all along. Mexico City Metro Overpass Collapse, 2021. It was just past 10 p.m. in Mexico City. The hum of the evening commute rolled across Line 12's elevated tracks, until, suddenly, steel gave out and concrete shattered. In a flash, train cars plunged from the sky, slamming onto traffic below. The collapse killed 26 people and left dozens more critically injured. Families were torn apart in seconds, some victims never even identified. But this wasn't just a freak accident. Investigations revealed a chilling truth. Engineers had raised red flags for years. Warnings about faulty welds, design flaws, and urgent maintenance needs. Each one ignored. The fallout? Public fury, nationwide protests, and a brutal reckoning for government oversight. Line 12 wasn't just a collapsed bridge, it became a symbol of what happens when corruption, neglect, and infrastructure collide. And the question still echoes. How many other bridges are one bad weld away from disaster? Valleyfield train crash, 1947. It happened on a frozen February night. Quiet, still, until the tracks lit up in fire. On February 17, 1947, Amtrak Sunset Limited derailment. 1993. It was just after 2:50 a.m., and the Amtrak Sunset Limited raced through the darkness, its passengers asleep, unaware that disaster was waiting ahead. Moments earlier, in the blackness near Mobile, Alabama, a barge drifting in the fog had slammed into a railroad bridge, knocking the tracks out of alignment. There were no alarms, no sensors, no time. The train hit the damaged section at full speed, derailing and plunging into the bayou below. 47 lives were lost in the murky waters that night. This wasn't just a freak event. It was the consequence of invisible gaps in safety. No warning systems on the bridge, poor visibility, and no real-time communication between the rail and maritime operators. The aftermath triggered a national outcry. Bridge monitoring systems were overhauled, new interagency protocols were created, and railroads across the U.S. began installing sensors that could detect structural damage before tragedy could strike. But the haunting lesson remains. Sometimes it's not the train that fails, it's everything surrounding it. Mississauga train derailment, 1979. It started with a spark and ended with the largest peacetime evacuation in Canadian history. On a quiet night in November 1979, a Canadian Pacific freight train thundered toward Mississauga, Ontario. But hidden beneath one of the cars, a cracked axle was moments from failure. When it gave way, tankers filled with propane, caustic soda, and chlorine gas tumbled from the tracks. The explosions lit up the night sky. Toxic smoke billowed over suburban streets. In a matter of hours, over 200,000 people were forced to flee, leaving behind homes, pets, and uncertainty. Miraculously, no one was killed. But the derailment triggered sweeping changes. Dangerous goods regulations were rewritten. Tank car designs were strengthened. Emergency response training was revolutionized nationwide. To this day, Mississauga is studied not just as a disaster, but as a turning point in how modern cities prepare for chemical catastrophe. And it asks a question we're still answering today. Are our cities ready for what rides through them in the dark?